There is no such beast in zoology as a homosexual. Boom. That is exactly how Hoshang Merchant opens India's first gay anthology. And let me tell you, it just dares you to rethink everything right out of the gate. Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're diving into a genuinely explosive and groundbreaking piece of literature from 1999 called Yaraana. This book completely dismantles the idea that same-sex love is just some modern Western import to the Indian subcontinent. Instead, we're going to see how it uses poetry, myth, and intensely personal memoirs to uncover a hidden historical continuum of desire. So let's just let that provocative opening line sit for a second. Merchant is aggressively challenging our modern assumptions here. He argues that the word homosexual is basically a late 19th century European invention, a clinical category, rather than a real person. By boldly declaring that this concept doesn't actually exist in India, where these relationships were historically quietly condoned but never codified, he's stripping away those rigid Western labels. He's forcing us to look at the visceral, lived realities of companionship that have actually existed for centuries.
Okay, let's dive into this. The central promise of Yaraana, which Penguin Books published way back in 1999, is huge. It sets out to prove that love between men has this long, continuous, vibrant history woven right into Indian culture itself. For decades, the mainstream narrative basically erased these stories, thanks in large part to colonial-era laws and Victorian morality. But Merchant digs into the archives, into vernacular literature, and into lived experiences to say, very loudly, we have always been here. It acts like a cultural excavation site, pulling up artifacts of love and longing that just refuse to be ignored.
And to pull off that massive historical excavation, the anthology goes big. It gathers voices from all across India's incredibly diverse linguistic landscape. We're not just talking about English-speaking metropolitan elites here. Merchant brings in Hindi, Marathi, Gujarati, and Urdu texts. This is super important because writing for a small-town audience in a regional language carries a totally different weight and context than modern English literature. By pulling all these regional voices together, the book unearths hidden histories and proves this isn't some isolated phenomenon. It's deeply rooted in the broader cultural fabric.
You can really see how rich and varied it is when you look at what's actually inside. The book gathers poems, plays, short stories, and these incredibly raw memoirs. You've got translations of great Urdu poets sitting right next to modern Indian English playwrights. It's a total feast of genres. Now, I will say, because it casts such a wide net, this mix can sometimes feel a little uneven. Jumping from an ancient Sufi poem straight into a piece of gritty contemporary urban prose can give you a bit of whiplash. But honestly, that very unevenness just shows how raw and unfiltered these voices are.
So how is it all structured? Well, it flows chronologically, taking us on this incredible deep dive. We start way back in the 1300s with Sufi traditions, exploring the divine through intense bonds of love. Then it moves into the 1900s with the haunting ghazals of Firak Gorakhpuri. Pushing into the 80s and 90s, we hit strident, unapologetic voices, Vikram Seth's verses, Mahesh Dattani's plays, and R. Raj Rao's gritty Bombay narratives. And it all culminates in 1999 with the release of Yaraana itself, tying centuries of literature into one cohesive volume.
Now, what's really interesting is the emotionally raw, searing reality we get from writers like Ashok Kavi. This isn't abstract poetry. It is visceral, lived trauma. In one incredibly powerful moment, a monk simply tells him, men have loved each other since the beginning. Yet Kavi also shares a deeply painful story about his own family, where his older brother's homophobia causes a massive rift. The most incredible part? Their mother bravely stands up to the prejudice. When the brother refuses to accept Kavi's partner, the mother actually suggests the older brother drop the family's surname, essentially disowning him to protect her gay son. It is a stunning, honest look at the real-world stakes of coming out.
So the crucial point is understanding the title of the book itself. What does Yaraana actually mean? Merchant explicitly defines it not as a clinical Western label, but as profound, sacred male bonding. We're talking youthful friendships, a blood brotherhood between equals. In a society where marriages were often rigidly arranged, these intense friendships provided an emotional and sometimes physical sanctuary. Yaraana represents a culturally specific framework for love and devotion between men that operates completely outside the Western paradigm of just being gay.
Moving from the personal to the divine, the anthology also lays out some serious mythological evidence. Merchant frames Eastern spirituality through a fascinating sociological lens, arguing that sexuality in the East has historically been a continuum, not a strict set of boxes. By examining Sanskrit texts and pre-Dravidian rituals, the book highlights how ancient cultures celebrated fluidity. From rituals where priests cross-dressed to bless marriages, to intense devotion in the guru-shishya tradition, the spiritual landscape is just packed with homoerotic undertones, if you know where to look. And this brilliantly illustrates that exact point, the myth of Lord Ayyappa. According to the text, this deity is quite literally the child of two male gods. The story goes that Shiva and Vishnu, with Vishnu taking the female form of Mohini, coupled after the churning of the oceans to create this new godchild. By highlighting this sacred myth, Merchant totally cements his argument. He's showing that same-sex union and gender fluidity aren't just modern anomalies. They are literally woven into the divine origin stories of the culture itself. Let's shift gears and talk about how this all comes together in Merchant's highly polemical introduction. It is dazzling. It's deeply intellectual, referencing everything from French philosophers to Bollywood icons. But wow, it is divisive. Merchant holds absolutely nothing back, critiquing MTV culture, Western gay liberation, and even the feminist establishment. He argues that modern pop culture has actually robbed young men of the solaces of traditional Yaraana. It's a meandering, provocative essay that really forces you to grapple with his combative worldview before you even get to the literature. So, if we step back and weigh the anthology as a whole, we have to balance the scales. Its strengths are absolutely undeniable. It's fearless, it's historically groundbreaking, and the voices are incredibly emotionally raw. But its weaknesses are definitely there. Merchant's polemical and sometimes self-contradicting voice can really divide readers, and sometimes translating complex regional dialects into English accidentally flattens the power of the original texts. If you compare it to a later work like Ruth Vanita's Same-Sex Love in India, Yaraana is definitely less scholarly, but honestly, it is so much more visceral. Taking all of that into account, the final verdict for Yara is a very solid 4 out of 5 stars. Sure, the genre mixing can be a little uneven, and the introduction might literally make you want to argue with the editor through the pages, but as a pioneering, brave, and completely unforgettable piece of literary history, it is a triumph. It did the incredibly heavy lifting of gathering these whispered, hidden histories and dragging them out into the mainstream light. It's a total landmark text. Which brings us to a final question for you. Will you choose polish, or will you uncover passion? If you crave hidden histories, honest voices, and stories that challenge how we categorize love, you should absolutely buy this. It is essential reading. Skip it only if you want neat, clinical academic polish over raw, messy, beautiful human truth. I highly encourage you to seek out this text and see what you think for yourself. Thanks for hanging out for this explainer, and as always, keep questioning the narratives we've been handed.